"Hello, sir. Our mother has a tattoo just like yours." He looked at his muscular forearm, tracing the jagged compass tattoo, a drunken mistake from 9 years ago. His blood ran cold as a sleek SUV pulled up. He had no idea the woman stepping out was a wealthy CEO who would soon offer him $2 million just to walk away. How were these Triplet girls in designer coats standing in a dusty park pointing at his deepest secret? But to understand how a struggling working-class carpenter ended up face-to-face with 3 identical little girls holding his deepest secret, we have to rewind the clock. The heavy scent of pine resin motor oil and old cherry wood dust hung thick in the air of the poorly lit carpentry shop. Marcus wiped his calloused, splintered hands on a grease-stained rag. His shoulders throbbed with a dull, relentless ache after grinding through a brutal 14-hour shift. This dusty, chaotic shop on the wrong side of the tracks was his entire world. It was how he kept a roof over his head. But right now, surrounded by broken pallets and rusty tools, it felt exactly like a prison. He needed cash, and he needed it 5 days ago. Over in the far corner, sitting curled up on a pile of canvas drop cloths, 6-year-old Miles let out a quiet, trembling whimper. The boy had been holding the left side of his jaw since yesterday morning, a severe, untreated cavity. Marcus reached into the breast pocket of his sawdust-covered flannel shirt and pulled out a crumpled, blue-tinted dental invoice. $800. He stared at the numbers printed on the paper. It might as well have been $2 million. He didn't have it. His checking account was currently sitting at $14.50. The crushing weight of absolute financial ruin pressed down heavily on his chest, making it hard to breathe. Marcus slowly rolled up his left sleeve, staring blankly at the faded ink permanently etched into his muscular forearm. It was a jagged compass missing its guiding star. A stupid, impulsive, drunken mistake from 9 years ago. A permanent reminder of a wild night in a cheap Seattle motel that he had spent nearly a decade trying to bury deep in the back of his mind. Frustration boiled over. He wanted to pick up his hammer and smash the rusted Delta bandsaw sitting on the workbench. He wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. But then, he looked over at Miles. He saw the silent tears welling up in the little boy's eyes, bravely trying not to cry out loud so he wouldn't bother his dad. Marcus stopped. He took a slow, deep breath, swallowing his wounded pride and his rising panic. A father's worth isn't measured by his bank account, but by the compass he gives his children. His old man's raspy voice echoed loudly in his memory. It was the only inheritance he had ever received. Marcus forced a tired but warm smile, grabbing his worn-out denim jacket from a rusty nail on the wall. "Come on, buddy," he said gently, walking over and lifting the 6-year-old boy into his strong arms. "Let's go to the county park down the street. We'll get some fresh air. It'll make the tooth feel a little better." He walked out of the dim shop, the crumpled $800 bill still burning a hole in his pocket. He just wanted to give his son 30 minutes of peace. He had absolutely no idea that this tiny, insignificant walk to a dusty public park was about to unlock a door he thought had been permanently sealed 9 years ago. But what he found at that park would completely turn his entire world upside down. The county park was usually dead quiet on a Tuesday afternoon. The rusted swings squeaked lazily in the wind. Marcus stood by a public water fountain, covered in peeling green paint, aggressively scrubbing the sticky pine sap and dirt off his forearms, while Miles sat quietly on a nearby wooden bench. The cold water splashed against his skin, making the dark, jagged lines of his compass tattoo stand out clearly in the afternoon sun. That was when the heavy silence broke. "Hello, sir. Our mother has a tattoo just like yours." Marcus froze completely. The cold water kept running over his hands, but he couldn't feel it anymore. He turned around slowly, water dripping from his elbows onto his boots. Standing less than 5 feet away were 3 little girls. They were absolutely identical. Same piercing gray eyes. Same straight blonde hair. Same expensive, pristine white designer coats that looked completely out of place against the dirt and grime of the public park. Before Marcus could even process the shock, before his brain could do the math, heavy footsteps crunched violently against the gravel path. A massive man in a tailored black suit shoved past the park bushes, his face twisted in panic and anger. It was Vance, the head of security. Vance didn't politely ask the girls to leave. He lunged forward and grabbed the closest girl by her arm, pulling her back with unnecessary brutal force. His cold eyes immediately locked onto Marcus. Vance scanned the sawdust-covered flannel, the grease on his jeans, and the worn-out steel-toed work boots. The utter disgust on the security guard's face was unmistakable. He didn't look at Marcus like a fellow human being. He looked at him like he was looking at a dangerous, filthy vagrant who had just crawled out of a dumpster. "Don't speak to the trash," Vance muttered harshly to the girls, shielding them behind his massive frame as if Marcus was actively carrying an infectious disease. 10 years ago, Marcus would have dropped the guy right there. He would have broken the man's jaw before he could even blink. But today, he just stood there, his heart hammering violently against his ribs at 120 beats per minute. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his fists. Instead, his sharp, calculating eyes locked onto a tiny, highly specific detail. Embroidered carefully on the left lapel of Vance's expensive suit jacket was a silver logo. 2 bold, interlocking letters, Bennett Logistics. The girls were quickly dragged away toward a sleek black Cadillac Escalade idling illegally by the curb. Marcus watched the red taillights disappear down the street, his mind racing uncontrollably back to that blurry, alcohol-soaked night in Seattle. The math was terrifyingly perfect. 9 years, triplet girls, the exact same incomplete compass tattoo. The fragile, fake piece of his struggling working-class life had just been violently ripped wide open. The absolute biggest secret of his entire existence had just walked right past him, carrying 3 pairs of hauntingly familiar gray eyes. But what he found later that night, when he finally searched that silver logo, would prove to be far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The worn-out tires of Marcus's 1998 Ford pickup truck crunched loudly against the gravel driveway of his small, rented house. It was well past midnight. He had finally managed to get little Miles to sleep by using a warm saltwater rinse and a crushed over-the-counter painkiller, but Marcus was wide awake. The adrenaline from the park was still coursing through his veins. His calloused hands were shaking slightly as he sat alone at the scratched, wobbly kitchen table, staring blankly at the glowing screen of his cracked second-hand laptop. He took a deep breath and slowly typed the words into the search bar, Bennett Logistics. In less than a fraction of a second, the screen filled with glossy, high-definition images. There were lengthy green financial articles discussing global shipping routes, multi-million-dollar corporate acquisitions, and massive distribution centers stretching across the entire country. But one specific image immediately dominated the search results. It was a Forbes magazine cover from last year. Staring back at him was a striking, powerful woman in an immaculate, custom-tailored ivory pantsuit. Her sharp, calculating gray eyes were absolutely identical to the 3 little girls he had just seen standing in the dirt at the county park. The bold, black headline beneath her picture read, "Sarah Bennett, the Logistics Queen, building a dynasty." Marcus leaned back heavily in his creaky wooden chair, the air rushing completely out of his lungs. 9 years ago, she wasn't a ruthless CEO. She was just Sarah, a stressed, overwhelmed college student who had walked into the exact same dive bar in Seattle looking for a temporary escape. She was trying to run away from her overbearing father's crushing expectations for just a single night. They had shared cheap, watery beer, traded stories about feeling completely lost in the world, and eventually made a reckless, impulsive decision to get matching compass tattoos from a 24-hour parlor down the street. When Marcus woke up the next morning, the motel room was empty. She was completely gone. No note left on the nightstand, no phone number, just a hazy memory. Now she was the untouchable head of a massive multi-billion-dollar empire, and she had secretly raised his 3 daughters in a highly guarded world of absolute luxury. Most men in Marcus's desperate financial position would have immediately picked up the phone and called a sleazy lawyer. They would have seen giant dollar signs flashing before their eyes. They would have ruthlessly calculated exactly how much child support they could squeeze out of a wealthy corporate dynasty. But Marcus didn't care about the money. He looked over his shoulder at the living room couch where little Miles was sleeping soundly under a thin, faded fleece blanket. Marcus just wanted to know the absolute truth. He wanted to look his 3 daughters in the eyes and know they were safe and loved. The very next morning, the harsh sun reflected blindingly off the sleek, heavily tinted glass windows of the Bennett Tower. The massive 50-story skyscraper completely dominated the downtown skyline, standing as a towering, intimidating monument to extreme wealth and corporate power. Marcus pushed his way through the heavy revolving glass doors, immediately feeling the icy blast of the high-end air conditioning system. The expansive lobby was breathtaking. It was lined with imported Italian marble floors and polished brass fixtures that gleamed flawlessly. Men and women in expensive custom designer suits walked purposefully past him, their premium leather shoes clicking sharply against the stone floor. Marcus stood out like a sore thumb in a jewelry store. He was wearing his absolute cleanest pair of denim work jeans, a faded gray cotton t-shirt, and his heavy, scuffed steel-toed work boots. He ignored the strange looks and walked confidently up to the pristine, beautifully curved reception desk. "Can I help you?" the young receptionist asked her, perfectly manicured fingers hovering over an expensive, low-profile keyboard. She looked him up and down, her polite, highly trained smile entirely failing to hide her obvious judgment. "I need to speak directly with Sarah Bennett," Marcus said, his voice steady and calm. The receptionist almost laughed out loud. "Do you have an appointment? Miss Bennett absolutely does not take unannounced walk-ins. Just tell her it's Marcus. She'll know exactly who it is." Before the receptionist could hit a single button on her multi-line phone, a massive, incredibly heavy hand clamped down hard on Marcus's left shoulder. "I told you yesterday not to speak to the trash." A low, highly aggressive voice growled right next to his ear. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He slowly turned his head to see Vance, the massive head of security from the park, standing right behind him. Vance was accompanied by two other broad-shouldered, highly trained security guards in identical black suits. "Listen to very carefully," Vance whispered dangerously, leaning in incredibly close so the passing wealthy executives wouldn't overhear the confrontation. "I don't know how a filthy grease monkey like you found this building, but you are way out of your league. You do not belong here." Marcus stood his ground perfectly, looking directly into the security guard's cold, threatening eyes. "I'm not leaving this building until I speak to her," Vance smirked. It was an ugly, arrogant expression. He reached inside the breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket and pulled out a crisp, heavy white envelope. He shoved it forcefully against Marcus's chest. "There's exactly $500 in cash in there," Vance said, his voice dripping with absolute, unfiltered contempt. "Take it, go buy yourself some new boots, get a decent hot meal, and crawl right back to whatever rusty trailer park you came from. If I see your face in this lobby ever again, I won't be politely asking you to leave." The bustling lobby had gone entirely quiet. Several wealthy corporate executives and high-powered businessmen had stopped in their tracks to watch the confrontation, whispering quietly and pointing at the dirty carpenter being aggressively handled by the security team. They were all waiting for the exact same thing. They expected the poor, desperate man to snatch the money greedily and scurry away in total shame. Marcus looked down at the thick white envelope pressed against his chest. He thought intensely about the $800 dental bill sitting right now on his kitchen counter. That $500 would solve a massive immediate problem for him and his son. It would stop his boy's pain today. It was the logical, desperate choice for a man with only $14 in the bank. But Marcus didn't take the money. Instead, his calloused, rough hands grabbed the envelope. Without breaking eye contact with Vance for even a single second, Marcus tore the heavy paper perfectly in half. He stacked the pieces and ripped it again, and then a third time, until the $500 was completely reduced to useless green confetti. He slowly opened his fingers and let the shredded pieces of cash flutter gently to the pristine, polished marble floor. Gasps echoed loudly through the completely silent lobby. The executives stared in absolute, paralyzing shock. "I don't want her money," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly and powerfully across the massive room. "Tell Sarah I'll be at my shop. She knows exactly where to find me." He purposefully turned his back on Vance and the guards pushing his way back out through the heavy revolving glass doors. He didn't look back once. But up on the 50th floor, locked inside a massive, ultra-modern corner office overlooking the entire city, someone was watching. Sarah Bennett sat rigidly in her expensive, custom ergonomic chair, her sharp gray eyes locked intensely onto the live, high-definition feed from the lobby security cameras. Her perfectly manicured hands were shaking uncontrollably. The arrogant security guard had failed. The $500 in cash had failed completely. The man with the compass tattoo was not going to quietly disappear. Sarah quickly realized that she had to handle this problem herself, and she was going to bring a much bigger weapon than a simple security guard. The fierce adrenaline of confronting the security guards at the Bennett Tower completely evaporated the moment Marcus walked back into his dusty, silent carpentry shop. It was replaced instantly by the crushing, terrifying weight of his reality. In the small, cramped living space attached to the back of the shop, little Miles was crying. It wasn't the brave, silent tears from the park yesterday. It was a loud, high-pitched wail of pure, unadulterated agony. The left side of the 6-year-old's face was badly swollen and hot to the touch. The severe infection in his untreated cavity had suddenly spread. Marcus rushed to the boy's side, checking his worn leather wallet with desperate, trembling fingers. A single, crumpled $10 bill and a few copper pennies stared back at him. It wasn't nearly enough for high-dose prescription antibiotics, let alone an emergency dental extraction at a late-night clinic. The cheap, over-the-counter painkillers from the corner pharmacy were doing absolutely nothing. The sound of his young son screaming tore through Marcus's chest like a serrated bandsaw blade. He looked frantically around the dimly lit shop, his sharp eyes searching desperately for anything of significant value. There were broken wooden chairs, half-finished pine cabinets, and dull, rusty hand tools. Nothing worth more than a few pathetic dollars. Then, his eyes landed in the far, dark corner of the room. Sitting quietly under a heavy, dust-covered canvas tarp was a vintage cast-iron Delta bandsaw. It was a beautiful, meticulously maintained piece of heavy machinery. It was the only item in the entire shop that didn't have a spot of rust. More importantly, it was the absolute only inheritance his late father had ever left him. It was the very machine Marcus had learned his difficult trade on as a teenager. It was the beating heart of his struggling carpentry business. Without it, he couldn't take on any major furniture projects. Without it, his shop was effectively dead. Miles let out another piercing, breathless cry of pain from the other room. Marcus didn't hesitate for another single second. He marched aggressively over to the heavy machine, his calloused, splintered hands grabbing the thick steel wrenches. He methodically unbolted the heavy steel base from the cracked concrete floor. He stripped off the thick leather drive belt. His broad shoulders and muscular back strained violently as he dragged the massive, 200-pound piece of solid cast iron across the sawdust-covered floor, hauling it painfully up into the rusty bed of his old Ford pickup truck. He drove recklessly to a 24-hour pawn shop on the dangerous edge of town. The sleazy, overweight owner behind the bulletproof glass took one quick look at Marcus's desperate, exhausted face and the panicked sweat on his brow. The owner knew exactly how much leverage he had. He offered a miserable $150 for a vintage machine, easily worth over $800. Marcus took the crumpled bills without a single word of protest. By 3 a.m., they were sitting in the brightly lit, sterile waiting room of the emergency dental clinic. The rotten tooth was successfully pulled. The dangerous infection was properly treated with strong antibiotics. Miles was finally sleeping peacefully in the passenger seat of the old truck, his swollen cheek resting gently against a small plastic ice pack. Marcus drove slowly back to the shop in complete heavy silence. He had saved his boy, but the cost was utterly devastating. Staring at the empty, dusty, rectangular patch of concrete where his father's beloved bandsaw used to sit, Marcus felt completely hollowed out. His livelihood was gone. He had officially hit rock bottom. He thought he had hit rock bottom, but the universe wasn't done testing him yet. Late the very next afternoon, the aggressive squeal of incredibly expensive ceramic brakes echoed loudly through the run-down, poverty-stricken industrial park. A massive black Cadillac Escalade pulled up violently, its heavy tires ruthlessly crushing the discarded wooden shipping pallets scattered outside Marcus's shop. The heavy armored door swung open, and an expensive pair of designer high heels stepped directly into the filthy dirt and sawdust. It was Sarah Bennett. She looked absolutely flawless, wearing a tailored dark charcoal business suit that undoubtedly cost more than Marcus's entire pickup truck. Vance stepped out of the driver's side right behind her, his massive hand resting casually near the concealed holster beneath his tailored jacket. Marcus stood up slowly from his workbench, silently wiping sticky wood glue off his rough, calloused hands. He didn't say a single word as the powerful, untouchable billionaire walked directly into his dirty, dimly lit workspace. The sharp, intoxicating scent of her premium designer perfume immediately overpowered the familiar working-class smell of pine resin and motor oil. Sarah didn't bother looking around the shop. She didn't feign any fake politeness. She walked straight up to Marcus's heavily scarred, rusted workbench and unclasped her expensive Italian leather briefcase. "Let's skip the dramatic emotional reunion," Sarah said, her voice ice cold and strictly business. She pulled out a thick, intimidating stack of legal documents and slammed them onto the wooden table. "This is a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. It legally binds you to never publicly or privately acknowledge any connection to me or to the 3 girls you saw yesterday." She reached back into the premium briefcase and pulled out a crisp, heavy white envelope. She tossed it casually on top of the legal papers as if it were a piece of garbage. "Inside that envelope is a certified cashier's check. It's made out directly to you." Sarah crossed her arms, her sharp, calculating gray eyes staring directly into his. "It's for exactly $2 million. The dusty shop went dead silent. The only sound was the distant, faint hum of highway traffic outside. Marcus stared down at the thick white envelope resting on his workbench. His exhausted mind raced uncontrollably. That single piece of paper could instantly solve every single agonizing problem in his miserable, struggling life. It could buy back his father's vintage bandsaw tomorrow morning. It could pay for little Miles's future college tuition in full. It could buy them a massive, safe house in a wealthy neighborhood far away from this dusty, collapsing prison of a shop. He would never, ever have to worry about a terrifying dental bill or a late rent notice for the rest of his life. All he had to do was pick up a pen and sign the paper. All he had to do was agree to completely erase himself from the lives of 3 identical little girls who shared his exact blood and his gray eyes. "Take the money," Marcus Sarah said softly, an ugly, arrogant smirk playing on the corner of her perfectly painted lips. She had done this 100 times before with desperate people. She knew exactly how the brutal world worked. Poor people always took the money. "Sign the paper. Fix your miserable, pathetic life. You have exactly 60 seconds before the offer drops to $1 million. Marcus didn't reach for the pen. He didn't even look at the $2 million check lying on his workbench. Instead, he slowly looked up, his tired eyes locking onto Sarah's. "I don't want your money," Marcus said quietly. His voice was heavy, lacking any of the greed or excitement Sarah had expected. "Before I sign anything, I just want one question answered." Sarah checked the expensive gold Rolex on her wrist, letting out an annoyed sigh. "Make it quick. I have a board meeting in 45 minutes. Marcus took a step forward. Vance immediately put his hand on his weapon, but Sarah held up 2 fingers, silently ordering her security chief to stand down. "Why?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Why did you keep my children a secret from me for 9 years? Why didn't you even give me a chance to be their father?" Sarah let out a bitter, humorless laugh. The sharp heels of her designer shoes tapped impatiently against the dusty wooden floorboards. There was no trace of guilt in her expression. There was no emotional breakdown. She looked at him with nothing but pure, calculating logic. "Let's be realistic," Marcus, Sarah said, sweeping her hand around the rundown, dimly lit carpentry shop. 9 years ago, I was young, stressed, and reckless. We met in that dive bar, drank ourselves into oblivion, and got matching tattoos on a ridiculous drunken dare. It meant absolutely nothing to me. But a month later, when I found out I was pregnant with triplets, the reality set in. I was exactly 3 months away from taking over Bennett Logistics as CEO. My father was stepping down, and the entire board of directors was watching my every move like a hawk. I was about to inherit a multi-billion-dollar corporate legacy. She took a step closer, her gray eyes narrowing harshly. "And who were you?" "A wandering broke carpenter drinking cheap beer in a dive bar. You had no future, no money, and no real prospects. My daughters needed a billion-dollar trust fund. They needed top-tier private schools, high-level security, and a massive legacy. They did not need a man with motor oil and sawdust permanently stained on his hands, dragging them down into a life of poverty." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow to the stomach. It was a brutal, completely unapologetic display of classism. To the corporate elite, his poverty wasn't just a financial state. It was treated like an infectious disease that had to be quarantined. "I made an executive decision," Sarah continued coldly. "I protected my assets, and I protected my daughters from you. Now take the $2 million and sign the paper." She thought her brutal honesty would completely break his spirit. She thought the overwhelming reality of their massive class divide would force him to take the money and run away in shame. Marcus looked down at the check. He looked at his heavily calloused, bruised hands. They were covered in tiny scars and splinters. They weren't soft, manicured hands that signed massive corporate deals, but they were honest hands. Money buys things, Marcus thought to himself, remembering his late father's old lessons, but it can never buy the hands that actually make them. The suffocating silence of the shop was suddenly broken by a loud, crisp ripping sound. Marcus picked up the thick stack of legal non-disclosure agreements and tore them perfectly in half with his bare hands. Sarah's eyes widened in absolute shock. Vance instinctively took a step forward, his jaw clenched tight. Without breaking eye contact, Marcus picked up the certified cashier's check for $2 million. He calmly crumpled it into a tight, useless ball of paper and casually tossed it into a rusty, oil-stained metal trash can sitting next to his workbench. "I don't want a single penny of your money," Marcus stated, his voice ringing out with absolute, unshakable authority. "And I'm not going to hire a lawyer to sue you for custody. I don't want to drag 3 little girls into a messy courtroom." Sarah was stunned. Her mouth parted slightly, completely unable to process what was happening. This wasn't in her playbook. "But I am their father," Marcus continued, his gray eyes blazing with a fierce, unbreakable resolve. "I want exactly 1 hour with them. This Sunday morning, at the Garfield Park Public Botanical Gardens. Just 1 hour to look them in the eyes and tell them I didn't abandon them. That's my final offer. Take it or leave it." For the first time in 9 years, the most powerful female CEO in the city was completely speechless. The untouchable billionaire had just been utterly defeated by a broke carpenter, not with money or legal power, but with sheer, undeniable self-respect. Sarah sharply turned on her heel and marched toward the exit, her face pale. As she stormed out, her expensive stiletto heel caught violently on a rough wooden plank protruding from the floor. She stumbled awkwardly, nearly falling into the sawdust. It was the very first time Marcus had ever seen her lose her perfect, flawless composure. Vance quickly grabbed her arm to steady her. "Let's go," Sarah hissed at the security guard, humiliated. Minutes later, sitting in the luxurious leather-back seat of the idling Cadillac Escalade, Sarah's hands were shaking uncontrollably. She gripped the leather steering wheel cover, her chest heaving. "Do you want me to handle him, ma'am?" Vance asked quietly from the front seat. "No," Sarah snapped, her voice trembling slightly. She was terrified, not of physical violence, but of a massive public relations nightmare. If Marcus went to the press, the scandal would destroy Bennett Logistics' stock prices overnight. "Stand down, Vance. Cancel my entire Sunday morning schedule. We're going to the Botanical Gardens." She thought she had won the war. But what Marcus did next would completely break her heart. The old grandfather clock on the shop wall struck midnight. Marcus was alone in the quiet, dusty workspace. Since he had desperately pawned his father's Delta bandsaw to pay for Miles's dental surgery, the shop was effectively crippled. He didn't have power tools to cut through hardwood anymore. But Marcus was a master carpenter. He didn't strictly need machines. He had his hands. He walked over to his small, dwindling wood reserve and carefully selected 3 identical blocks of premium aged cherry wood. He placed them on his scarred workbench and pulled out his old leather-wrapped hand chisels and a set of dull carving knives. He was going to make a gift for his daughters. 1 a.m. Marcus systematically chipped away the rough edges of the cherry wood, his calloused thumbs pressing hard against the sharp steel blades. Without the bandsaw, the physical labor was brutal. 3:30 a.m. He began the delicate, intricate carving process. He was making 3 small, beautiful wooden compasses. He poured 9 entire years of stolen, bottled-up fatherly love into every single microscopic detail. On the face of each wooden compass, he painstakingly carved a perfect guiding North Star. It was the exact star that was missing from the drunken tattoo on his arm. 5 a.m. The raw friction of the heavy sandpaper against the hard wood began to tear open the blisters on his fingers. Drops of blood stained the white rags on his bench. The sharp, earthy smell of heated cherry wood filled the cold room. His back screamed in pure agony from hunching over the bench all night, but he refused to stop for even a second. By 6:15 a.m., the pale morning sunlight finally broke through the dirty shop windows. Marcus sat back, his breathing heavy and ragged. His fingers were swollen, bleeding, and trembling from exhaustion. But resting perfectly on the dusty workbench were 3 flawlessly polished, identical cherry wood compasses. They were beautiful. He was ready to meet his daughters. 8:50 a.m. Sarah Bennett checked her heavy diamond watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The Garfield Park Public Botanical Gardens were heavily suffocating. The air inside the massive glass dome was thick, hot, and heavy, with the dense, earthy smell of damp soil and ancient green ferns. It was the absolute opposite of the sterile, heavily air-conditioned, perfectly controlled environment of the Bennett Tower. She stood tensely near a large fountain, her defensive walls fully raised. She was dressed in a sharp, casual designer outfit that still managed to look wildly expensive. She was fully prepared for a second extortion attempt. She expected Marcus to arrive, dramatically cry, and demand legal custody. Standing exactly 5 steps away was Vance, his thick hand resting comfortably near the heavy bulge at his waist. "Do not engage him unless he becomes physically violent," Sarah ordered Vance quietly, desperately trying to maintain her fragile grip on the situation. But her absolute control was merely a thin, transparent mask, hiding the sheer, blinding terror of a mother who knew she had made a terrible, unforgivable mistake 9 years ago. Standing closely around her legs were the triplets, Claire, Audrey, and Grace. They were dressed in pristine, identical white silk dresses. Their small faces looked timid and completely confused by the heavy, terrifying tension radiating from their mother. The heavy brass bell above the greenhouse doors suddenly echoed through the humid air. Marcus walked in. He wasn't alone. Walking timidly beside him, holding his heavily bandaged hand, was 6-year-old Miles. The swelling on the little boy's face had finally gone down thanks to the strong antibiotics. Marcus didn't even glance at the wealthy CEO. He completely ignored the deadly warning glare Vance shot him. Instead, he walked directly toward the fountain and slowly dropped down to one knee on the damp, mossy brick floor, bringing his eyes perfectly level with the 3 triplet girls. The 3 little girls stared back at him with identical, striking gray eyes. Marcus reached into his worn denim jacket. His right hand was tightly wrapped in thick white gauze. Dark, rusty red blood was actively seeping through the fresh bandages, a direct result of violently sanding hard cherry wood for hours without proper tools. The rough, bleeding hands stood in stark, jarring contrast to the perfectly clean, pristine white silk dresses the girls wore. With incredibly gentle, trembling fingers, Marcus slowly handed a small, perfectly polished object to each of the 3 girls. It was the cherry wood compasses. The warm, sweet smell of the heated wood mingled beautifully with the damp earth of the greenhouse. He didn't demand that they call him Dad. He didn't loudly stake his legal claim or scream at Sarah. He just offered them a soft, deeply exhausted smile. "My tattoo is missing its guiding star," Marcus said softly, his deep voice thick with emotion. "But I carved them perfectly right here for you. No matter where you get lost in this massive world, I want you to remember that there is always someone out there willing to use his hands to guide you safely back home." He didn't ask them to call him Dad. He just wanted them to know they were profoundly loved. Little Grace, the youngest, stepped forward. Her tiny, delicate fingers reached out and gently touched the faded, jagged compass tattoo visible just below Marcus's rolled-up sleeve. She looked down at the wooden compass in her hand, her intelligent gray eyes instantly recognizing that the wooden star fit perfectly into the empty space on his skin. But instead of violently bursting into tears and throwing their arms around the strange carpenter, the 3 identical little girls suddenly went completely quiet. They became deeply thoughtful, processing the massive weight of the moment. Slowly, Claire, Audrey, and Grace turned around. They looked up at Sarah. Their identical gray eyes weren't filled with anger. They were filled with a deep, profound sadness and a quiet, devastating sense of betrayal. It was the heartbreaking look of children realizing their mother had intentionally stolen something precious from them. That single, sorrowful look was the absolute fatal blow. It instantly, completely destroyed the massive invisible wall of class and power Sarah had spent 9 years desperately building. The billion-dollar trust funds, the elite private schools, the massive corporate legacy of Bennett Logistics. It all instantly turned to ash. It meant absolutely nothing compared to the raw, undeniable pain she had just caused her own daughters by ruthlessly stripping away their father. The incredibly wealthy, untouchable CEO finally dropped her arrogant crown. Sarah took a shaky step forward. Without looking back, she aggressively waved her hand, ordering the massive security guard to get out of the greenhouse immediately. Vance hesitated, but quickly retreated through the glass doors. Sarah slowly dropped down to her knees right on the damp, dirty brick floor, perfectly mirroring Marcus. Tears of absolute overwhelming regret began streaming rapidly down her face, completely ruining her expensive, flawless mascara. "I am so sorry," Sarah whispered, her voice completely breaking as she looked from the heavily bleeding hands of the broke carpenter to the sad eyes of her daughters. "I was so wrong." For the very first time in 9 years, Sarah Bennett wasn't an arrogant corporate CEO. She was just a broken mother who finally realized how terribly wrong she had been. The cold, heavy shadow that had haunted them for 9 years was finally chased away by the warm sunlight pouring through the massive glass roof. The suffocating dark shadows that used to haunt the rundown carpentry shop were completely gone. The large rolling doors were thrown wide open, allowing the warm golden afternoon sunlight to pour across the scarred wooden workbenches. Millions of tiny sawdust particles floated peacefully in the sunbeams. The aggressive squeal of ceramic brakes announced the arrival of the massive black Cadillac Escalade. But this time it didn't aggressively crush the wooden pallets outside. It parked carefully, and this time there was no massive security guard. Vance was nowhere to be seen. Sarah Bennett opened the heavy armored door herself. She stepped out into the dirt, wearing a simple pair of blue jeans and comfortable sneakers. The cold, untouchable CEO mask was completely gone, replaced by a soft, genuine smile. The heavy back doors of the Escalade flew open. Claire, Audrey, and Grace sprinted out, completely ignoring the dirt. They weren't wearing pristine, expensive white silk dresses anymore. They wore simple, comfortable cotton t-shirts and denim overalls, excitedly rushing straight into the dusty shop to find their brother Miles. Within seconds, all 4 children were happily covered in a fine layer of cherry wood, sawdust, laughing loudly as Marcus showed them how to properly sand a block of pine. Marcus never took the $2 million check. He didn't ask for child support, and he didn't try to rekindle a dead romance with a billionaire CEO. He remained exactly who he was, a working-class carpenter with calloused hands and a rusted pickup truck. But by refusing to sell his soul, by prioritizing his absolute self-respect over a massive payday, he achieved something money could literally never buy. He earned the absolute, undeniable respect of the most powerful woman in the city. And more importantly, he earned the complete, unconditional love of his 4 children. Money can buy a lot of things in this world. It can buy massive empires, an army of security guards, and absolute obedience. But only pure, undeniable self-respect and unconditional love can truly set the compass in a child's heart. Marcus looked down at his muscular forearm. Surrounded by his laughing children, the jagged, faded compass tattoo didn't look like a drunken mistake anymore. It looked exactly like a map that had finally led him home. What would you have done if a billionaire offered you $2 million in cold, hard cash to completely walk away from your own flesh and blood? Would you have the incredible strength to tear up the check? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that a father's love is absolutely priceless, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more incredible stories.